Majority Whip.
Mr. President, as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, you are aware of the fact that I announced last week in the committee that we would vote to authorize subpoenas to Harlan Crow, Robin Arkley, and Leonard Leo as part of the Judiciary Committee's continuing investigation into the ethical situation at the U.S. Supreme Court. I do not make this decision lightly. Seeking authorization to issue subpoenas is a relatively rare occurrence in the committee. So today I come to the floor for a few minutes to explain why we've taken this significant step. Over the last several months, it's become clear that the Supreme Court is in desperate need of a binding code of ethics as we learn of lavish gifts and luxury travel that certain Supreme Court justices have accepted from a gaggle of fawning billionaires. Let's start with Justice Clarence Thomas. The sheer number and value of gifts accepted by Justice Thomas is staggering, and the shamelessness with which he accepted them is stunning. For decades, Justice Thomas has accepted lavish gifts from Harlan Crow, a conservative billionaire with business before the Supreme Court. These gifts have ranged from a $19,000 Bible, once owned by Frederick Douglass, to a $15,000 bust of Abraham Lincoln. Justice Thomas also accepted private jet trips and free lodging at Bohemian Grove, an exclusive all-male invitation-only retreat in the redwoods of California. And these are only examples of what Justice Thomas disclosed. After the Los Angeles Times reported on these disclosures, Justice Thomas, in 2004, 19 years ago, promptly stopped disclosing gifts as required by law. We learned this year that he continued to accept expensive gifts for the past 19 years, and that these billionaire benefactors have been part of a growing list. There isn't time to detail all of the undisclosed gifts which the press has discovered and luxury travel that Justice Thomas has accepted. But for the sake of a record, I'm going to give a few examples. In 2019, Justice Thomas and his wife flew to Indonesia on Harlan Crow's private jet and boarded Crow's 162-foot super yacht, the Michaela Rose, to island hop with Harlan Crow and his wife. The total cost of that trip alone could have exceeded $500,000 if Justice Thomas had chartered the jet and yacht. Lucky for him, Harlan Crow was happy to cover the cost. Justice Thomas also continued to join Crow on trips to Bohemian Grove in California. He visited Crow's ranch in East Texas, spent summers at Crow's private resort in the Adirondacks. But there's more. Crow paid thousands of dollars to cover tuition for Justice Thomas's grandnephew. He purchased real estate owned by Thomas and his relatives, including Thomas' mother's home, where she continues to live rent-free. And Crow donated $500,000 to a conservative advocacy group founded by Justice Thomas's wife. I could go on and on and on, because the list of gifts Justice Thomas has chosen to accept and failed to disclose goes on and on and on. Justice Thomas is not the only Supreme Court justice who's accepted lavish gifts from billionaires and refused to disclose them. In 2008, Justice Samuel Alito boarded a private jet bound for Alaska to enjoy a luxury fishing trip, a trip that should have cost him over $100,000, but it didn't cost him one penny, because of the man who organized the flight and joined Alito on the luxury fishing trip, Leonard Leo. Mr. Leo arranged Justice Alito's free flight to Alaska and his free lodging once he arrived. Their host at the luxury fishing lodge was a gentleman named Robin Arkley. Over the next few days, Justice Alito and his travel companions enjoyed guided fishing trips, flights on bush planes, meals of Alaskan king crab and Kobe beef, and wine costing upwards of $1,000 a bottle. Justice Alito did not disclose any of this. And when challenged, for example, on the jet ride, why that should be disclosed, he said it didn't view it as a gift because if he didn't go, the seat on the plane would have gone empty. That's an interesting analysis of a gift from a strict constructionist. This kind of scandalous behavior cannot continue. One former federal judge who served for years in the Judicial Committee that reviews the justice's financial disclosures had this to say about the gifts to Justice Thomas, quote, "In my career, I don't remember ever seeing this degree of largesse given to anybody." When referring to the cascade of gifts from Harlan Crow to Justice Thomas, the former chief White House ethics lawyer for Republican President George Bush said, and I quote, "This is way outside the norm. This is way in excess of anything I've ever seen." And renowned conservative jurist Judge J. Michael Ludwig stated in testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, quote, "The Supreme Court should want to lead by example that only it can set. It should want to conduct itself in its non-judicial activities in all ways such that they are above and beyond reproach." Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has not lived up to this expectation. That's why our Senate Judiciary Committee is exercising its constitutional authority to investigate. Months ago, I, along with my Democratic colleagues on the committee, sent letters to Crow, Arkley, and Leo, among others, seeking details about what exactly has been provided to Supreme Court justices. Our goal has been to understand how specific individuals and groups with business before this court have used undisclosed gifts to gain private access to justices, access not afforded to others. For months, Crow has refused to fully comply with the committee's request, and Leo has completely stonewalled the committee. Only now, under threat of subpoena, Mr. Arkley has stepped forward, and we are looking forward to continuing our conversation with him this week. The fact that we have to go to this length is unacceptable but necessary. The Senate and the American people deserve to know the full extent of how billionaires with interests before the court use their immense wealth to buy private access to our Supreme Court. That's why on Thursday, the Judiciary Committee will vote to authorize subpoenas for these individuals. The vote is a critical step in the committee's exercise of its constitutional right and duty to conduct oversight of the federal judiciary. It is critical to the committee's effort to restore the court's reputation. The highest court in the land should not have the lowest standards of ethics. This is not a fight I wanted, but now that it's come to this, the Judiciary Committee will not back down. Mr. President, most Americans are shocked to know or to learn that the 9 justices on the Supreme Court are the only major elected officials in the United States of America who are beyond the reach of a code of ethics. How do you explain that? How can you explain that every federal judge in America is bound by a code of ethics except for the 9 Supreme Court justices? What's so special about them? The Constitution makes it clear that we don't have royalty in this country, but they're acting like they belong to some regal fraternity or sorority. That's got to come to an end. And when you look at this situation, members of Congress are held to standards, and I'm not complaining. I knew what I was getting into when I signed up for this job, held to standards of disclosure and limitation on gifts. I cannot tell you how many times I've said to a person, "Is this worth more than $50? And if they answer, "Well, maybe it might be," I say, "Well, keep it, and thanks for thinking of me." You know, that's the kind of thing that just becomes routine part of public service. These lavish gifts, particularly from individuals who have business before the court, are just unacceptable and inexplicable. It is important for us to have a response when people ask, "What are you doing to clean up the things at the Supreme Court?" The first thing we did, I think, was the responsible, respectable thing to do. We invited the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to appear before our committee and tell us his thoughts on the subject and what he believes should be done to deal with this bad publicity and these disclosures. He declined the invitation. I don't hold it against him. He explained in my presence a few weeks ago why he did. I understand it. I disagree with it, but I understand it. But 11 years ago was the first time I contacted the Chief Justice and said, "This has got to come to an end. Tell us what you're going to do about establishing a code of ethics on the Supreme Court." 11 years ago, and nothing has happened since. I want to salute and commend my colleague, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of the state of Rhode Island. He's been a leader on this topic in the subcommittee which he chairs in the Judiciary Committee, and we have cooperated in this effort. We will meet this week. This is not the first time Judiciary Committee will be asked to issue subpoenas. It happened before under Republican leadership as well, in a much different type of case. But the fact of the matter is that we have tried carefully and studiously to come up with this information the right way, and have unfortunately not had the kind of results we wanted. A subpoena, we hope, will jar loose the information to explain exactly what happened with the gift giving by several individuals.